The paper cut, a tiny, stinging wound from the official Homeowners Association HOA letter, felt insignificant compared to the words that sliced through me as I stood at my mailbox. After review of community boundaries, your back acre has been reclassified as common property. My hands trembled, the paper crinkling in my grip. This land, this sacred land, had been in my family for 3 generations. 3 generations of laughter, of sweat, of memories woven into the very soil. I marched, fueled by a burning injustice, straight to Olivia Sterling's house, our newly elected HOA president. Olivia, with her perpetually perfect landscaping and an even more perfect, chillingly plastic smile. She answered the door in designer workout clothes, the picture of smug leisure barely concealing her annoyance. "Can I help you, Michael?" "This letter," I said, my voice tight with barely suppressed rage, "says you're taking my land. There must be some mistake." Olivia's smile didn't reach her eyes, those cold, calculating pools. "No mistake, Michael. Our professional survey shows your grandfather's hand-drawn maps were inaccurate. The board voted unanimously last night. Without telling me, I was incredulous. I've been paying taxes on that land for 15 years. She examined her flawlessly manicured nails, a picture of bored indifference. The HOA bylaws don't require notification for property corrections. We're planning a wonderful resort-style pool there. Everyone will benefit, even you. I was about to unleash a torrent of furious arguments when music exploded from next door at Ethan and Sophia's place. Olivia's smile finally turned genuine, a predatory glint in her eyes. "I should go. Ethan and Sophia are hosting the neighborhood welcome party. You should come, Michael. It might help you adjust to the changes." Walking home, the music grew louder, a throbbing, mocking beat. Through the fence, I could see my neighbors, Ethan and Sophia, with their circle of friends, laughing and celebrating by their brand new pool, built suspiciously close to our property line. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. That night, sleep was a distant, impossible dream. The bass thumped relentlessly until 1 a.m., a physical manifestation of the injustice. I tried calling Ethan twice. No answer. Finally, at 1:15 a.m., I stomped over and knocked, my jaw clenched. Ethan answered, red-faced and holding a beer, the smell of stale alcohol wafting out. "Hey, man, party's over, what's up?" "It's almost 1:30, I said, my voice dangerously low. "Some of us work tomorrow." Sophia appeared behind him, a smug, knowing look on her face. "We stopped the music right at 1 oh, check the bylaws. The noise is still—" Ethan cut me off, his tone dripping with condescension. "Olivia said we're good until 1. Not our problem if you can hear people talking." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "Speaking of Olivia, did you know about this HOA plan for my back acre?" Their guilty looks, the fleeting exchange of glances, told me everything. They knew. They all knew. "You did. You knew they were stealing my land." "Not stealing," Sophia corrected, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Reallocating. The resort will have a lap pool for serious swimmers, cabanas, a cocktail bar. On my property." Ethan shrugged, the picture of uncaring complicity. "It's not personal, Michael. Olivia showed us the real property lines. Your grandfather's maps were wrong. Back home, sleep remained elusive." I went to the attic and hauled down Grandpa's old wooden chest, the one filled with family history. Inside, nestled amongst faded photographs and brittle letters, were the original property documents, yellowed with age and smelling faintly of cedar. I spread them on the kitchen table under the harsh glare of the lamp, comparing them to the modern survey Olivia had attached to her letter. Something was profoundly wrong. Grandpa's boundaries followed natural landmarks: the creek, the old oak tree, the rocky ridge. The HOA map ignored these completely, drawing straight, artificial lines that conveniently cut off my most beautiful and valuable acre. Then I noticed it. Small, almost illegible writing in the corner of Grandpa's deed, a detail I'd never paid attention to before. It referenced county survey markers from 1952. If those markers still existed, a plan, audacious and desperate, began to form in my mind. But I'd need help. I scrolled through my phone contacts, my finger hovering over a name: James Riley, a surveyor who'd worked with my father years ago. It was 3 a.m., but I didn't care. I sent a text. The next morning, I feigned illness and drove to the county records office. My cousin Ben worked there, and I needed access to the original surveys. "These HOA people," Ben muttered, shaking his head as we dug through dusty, forgotten files, "they're getting bolder every year. Ah, here it is, the 1952 survey." It clearly showed my property extending beyond what even I had thought. The creek had moved after a flood in the 70s, but property lines, as Ben explained, didn't move with it. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Community announcement. Groundbreaking for Pine Crest Resort begins Tuesday. Please clear any personal items from the designated area." Tuesday. That gave me 5 days. 5 days to fight for my family's legacy. On my way home, I drove past Ethan and Sophia's house. Workers were setting up an even bigger speaker system by their pool. Ethan waved cheerfully as I passed, a silent, smug taunt. That afternoon, James Riley arrived with his equipment, his face grim and determined. "Let's find those original markers," he said. "If they're still there, the HOA has a big problem." We worked until sunset, careful to stay out of sight behind my shed. Under years of overgrown grass and tangled weeds, James's metal detector finally beeped, a sharp, triumphant sound. He dug, carefully exposing a small concrete marker. His eyebrows shot up. "According to this, your property extends another 50 feet that way," he pointed, "which includes part of Ethan's new pool." We found 3 more markers before dark. Each one confirmed what Grandpa's maps showed. My land was actually larger than what I had been maintaining. "There's more," James said quietly, his voice hushed with a sense of discovery. "See this ridge? The Geological Survey from the 50s notes it as a potential archaeological site. Native American artifacts were found here in the 40s. I remembered Grandpa's stories about arrowheads and pottery shards. I'd always dismissed them as tall tales. What does that mean, legally? If confirmed, James explained, it could trigger a historical preservation review. No development allowed. That night, another party started next door. This time, however, I smiled as the music blared. Let them enjoy it while they could. My doorbell rang around 8 p.m. Sarah Johnson, my 80-year-old neighbor from across the street, stood there with a casserole dish, her eyes twinkling with wisdom. "Thought you might need some dinner with all that commotion next door," she said. I invited her in, and surprisingly found myself telling her everything. Sarah listened patiently, her silence more comforting than any words could have been. Then she spoke, her voice firm and resolute. "Olivia's been pulling these tricks for years. She forced the Millers out last summer with fake violations. Their house is now her daughter's. Why doesn't anyone stop her?" I asked, despair creeping in. "Fear," Sarah said simply. "She's friends with the mayor's wife." But then her eyes twinkled again. "I taught high school history for 40 years and volunteered at the county museum. I know a thing or two about archaeological preservation." As Sarah left, she paused at the door. "This land means something to you, doesn't it?" Beyond just property value, I thought about Grandpa teaching me to fish in the creek, Dad building my treehouse on the old oak. "It's my history," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Then fight for it," she said simply. In bed that night, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m. Olivia's house. Bringing contractors to mark pool placement on your acre. Don't tell Michael." They had meant to text someone else. My heart pounded. They weren't waiting until Tuesday. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. I needed to be ready. I woke before sunrise, gulping down coffee, the adrenaline coursing through me. James arrived in an unmarked truck, his equipment hidden under tarps. "If we're right about those markers," he whispered as we worked in the dim, pre-dawn light, "the HOA survey missed nearly 2 acres of your land." Dew soaked my jeans as we hammered in flags, bright, defiant markers, exactly where Grandpa's deed indicated. With each stake, my confidence grew, a sense of righteous anger fueling my actions. The last marker went directly through the corner of Ethan and Sophia's fancy new deck. "They built that deck last month," I told James, a grim satisfaction settling in. "Convenient timing," he replied, checking his GPS device. "According to county permits, they built it after the HOA's new survey, almost like they knew where the new boundary would be." He handed me his tablet, showing the official report. The HOA survey completely ignored the creek's original path before the 1978 flood. No professional would make that mistake accidentally. As the sun climbed higher, we heard vehicles approaching. "Hide the equipment," I whispered. "Let's see what they do." From behind my garden shed, we watched. Olivia arrived with 3 other board members and a landscaping crew. They unloaded spray paint and measuring tools, laughing and joking as they marked out locations for cabanas, a tiki bar, and a massive pool, all on my property. "This spa feature will be perfect right here," Olivia said, marking a big, ugly X through my grandmother's rose garden, the one I'd painstakingly maintained for 20 years. My blood boiled. I wanted to confront them, to scream, to unleash the fury that had been building for days. But James held me back. "Not yet. We need more." Later that morning, I visited the local historical society, where my mum had volunteered for years. The director, Maria, greeted me warmly. "Your timing is interesting," she said, pulling out a folder. "Someone from the county just requested all records about your property, an Olivia Sterling." Maria nodded. She seemed very interested in whether any historical claims had ever been filed. I explained my situation, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and desperation. Maria's expression darkened. "This happened in Meadowbrook. Their HOA president works for the same development company as Olivia." She pulled out a newspaper article. "They turned half the neighborhood into vacation rentals after forcing original owners out." Now I understood. This wasn't just about a community pool. It was about property values, about development deals, about lining the pockets of a select few. "I need proof of the archaeological significance," I said. "Grandpa always talked about—" Maria smiled. "Your grandfather actually donated some artifacts he found on your land." She brought out a small box, carefully preserved. Inside were arrowheads and pottery fragments, tangible evidence of a history that stretched back centuries. These were catalogued, but never fully examined. I could arrange for an expert assessment. Back home, I found Sarah in her garden, across the street. "They're marking up my land right now," I told her, my voice filled with a renewed sense of urgency. "I know," she said calmly. "I've been taking pictures every hour." She showed me her phone. "Documentation is key." That afternoon, I called Ben again. "I need 2 things: the emergency historical preservation filing process and any information on Olivia Sterling's business connections." While waiting for Ben's callback, I noticed Ethan watching me from his yard. "Hey, neighbor," he called, his voice far too cheerful. Excited about the new resort? I walked to the fence. My eyes narrowed. Why did you build your deck after the HOA survey, but before announcing the boundary changes? His smile faltered. What? The permit for your deck was filed one day after Olivia's survey. Interesting coincidence, wouldn't you say? Look, we're just following the official property lines, he stammered. The official lines include those 1952 markers I found this morning, I said, my voice hard. The ones right under your hot tub. Ethan's face drained of color. He muttered something about needing to make a call and hurried inside. Within minutes, my phone rang. Olivia. Michael? Her voice was honey-sweet, a stark contrast to the venom I knew she harbored. I hear you have concerns about the community project. Why don't you stop by and we can discuss them? I'd rather talk with everyone present, I replied. How about a special HOA meeting? That's not necessary. This is already decided. Then so is my next step, I replied, my voice firm. Are you threatening me? Her voice hardened. Just following proper procedures, I said, like documenting the original boundary markers, your survey somehow missed. Silence. A long, pregnant silence. Then, what markers? The ones from 1952. James Riley found them this morning. I could almost hear her mind racing, calculating, trying to find a way out. Those old things, they're not relevant to modern surveys. The county assessor's office disagrees, I said. I just spoke with them. Another pause, shorter this time. We'll discuss this tomorrow. Meanwhile, stay off the common areas. You mean my property, I said. I'll be using all of it, thanks. I hung up, feeling a surge of power, of defiance, stronger than I had felt in weeks. Ben called back immediately. You hit a nerve, he said. Olivia just requested emergency access to all your property records. Too late for her, I said, a grim satisfaction settling in. Way too late. I've already flagged your parcel with a preliminary historical review notice. Nothing can be developed while that's pending. That evening, I invited Sarah and James over to plan our next steps. We spread maps across my kitchen table, the evidence of Olivia's deception laid out in stark black and white. Headlights swept across the windows. Someone's here, Sarah said, peeking through the curtains. It's Olivia, and Ethan, and Sophia. Before I could respond, my phone pinged with messages from neighbors. Are you okay? Saw Olivia heading to your place with the sheriff. Ethan's telling everyone you threatened him. James looked grim. They're escalating, trying to intimidate you. Let them try, I said, gathering our evidence into a folder. The doorbell rang, followed by aggressive knocking. I opened it to find Olivia, Ethan, Sophia, and a man in uniform. Evening, folks, I said calmly. What brings you all here so late? Olivia stepped forward, her smile tight and predatory. Michael, this is Deputy Wilson. We're concerned about your erratic behavior today. Ethan nodded vigorously. You threatened me in front of my family. My mouth fell open. That's completely false. Deputy Wilson looked uncomfortable. Sir, I understand there's a property dispute, but threatening neighbors— I never threatened anyone, I interrupted. In fact, I have witnesses to our conversation. I pointed to Sarah's house, where her security camera faced my yard. The deputy's expression changed. Is that so? Olivia cut in smoothly. This isn't just about today. We're concerned about Michael's mental state. He's making wild claims about property lines that were settled years ago. I laughed despite myself. Settled? You just resurveyed them last month. Sophia spoke up, her voice dripping with false concern. He's been obsessed with boundaries since we moved in, always watching us, complaining about noise. Because you built on my property and party until 1 a.m., I countered. The deputy raised his hands. Okay, slow down, everyone. This sounds like a civil matter, not criminal. Olivia wasn't giving up. He's been digging up the community land without permission, destroying landscaping. You mean my land? I opened the folder and handed the deputy copies of James's survey report, the original deed, and photos of the 1952 markers. These documents prove the HOA survey is incorrect. They're trying to take nearly 2 acres of my legal property. The deputy reviewed the papers, while Olivia fumed silently. "Ma'am," he finally said, "this appears to be a legitimate property dispute that needs to be handled through proper channels, not police intervention." "But," Olivia started. "Unless there's evidence of actual threats or trespassing," the deputy interrupted, "I can't take action here." He handed the papers back to me. "I suggest both parties contact their attorneys." As they turned to leave, I called out, "Olivia, one more thing. You might want to tell your friends at Lakeside Development that the county has initiated a historical preservation review of my property, effective immediately." Olivia froze mid-step, then spun around. "How did you know about—" She caught herself, but it was too late. The deputy looked between us, clearly sensing there was more to the story. "Have a good night," I said pleasantly, closing the door on Olivia's shocked face. Inside, Sarah, James, and I exchanged looks of triumph, but we knew this was just the beginning. "They'll come back with lawyers next," James warned, his voice sober, shattering the momentary euphoria. "Let them," I replied, tapping the folder, a newfound confidence surging through me. "We have truth on our side." Sarah smiled slightly, a knowing glint in her eyes. "And tomorrow," she added, her voice low and conspiratorial, "tomorrow we'll have even more. I've arranged for an archaeologist friend to examine those artifacts Maria found." My phone buzzed with a text from Ben. "Found the connection. Olivia's husband is CFO at Lakeside Development. They just filed plans for vacation rentals in your neighborhood." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just about a resort pool. It was about a much larger, more insidious scheme. They wanted my land as part of a bigger commercial development, a cash cow at the expense of our community. "We need to warn the neighbors," I said, my voice filled with urgency. "Already happening," Rose replied, showing me her phone, where a neighborhood chat group was exploding with messages about Olivia's development connections, the anger and betrayal palpable. A final text arrived from an unknown number. "HOA emergency meeting called for 7 a.m. tomorrow. All board members required." James chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Looks like someone's panicking." I should have felt relieved, vindicated even, but a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. They weren't giving up this easily. Olivia had too much invested. This was a strategic retreat, not a surrender. As if summoned by my words, the lights across my backyard suddenly blazed on. Massive construction lights, mounted on Ethan and Sophia's property, aimed directly at my house. The glare was blinding, pouring through every window, turning my home into a brightly lit stage. "What the—" James started, squinting against the harsh light. Rose peered through the brightness. "There's someone out there, by your shed." Squinting, I could just make out figures moving on my property. They were removing my boundary flags, dismantling the physical evidence of my claim. The rumble of heavy machinery jolted me awake at 4:30 a.m. I scrambled to my window and spotted it. A massive yellow bulldozer creeping towards my back acre like a prehistoric beast. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, the deed papers, and a flashlight before racing outside in my slippers, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Stop! Right now!" I shouted, waving my flashlight wildly, my voice barely audible above the engine's roar. The bulldozer headlights blinded me as it continued forward, its metal blade gleaming menacingly in the pre-dawn darkness. The operator, a rough-looking man in a hard hat, finally cut the engine, his expression a mixture of annoyance and indifference. "Look, buddy, I'm just following orders," he said, his voice gruff. "Got paperwork right here saying this is HOA property. Well, your paperwork is wrong, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. My grandfather's warnings about staying vigilant, about protecting our property lines echoed in my mind. Headlights swept across my yard as 3 vehicles pulled up. Olivia stepped out of her white Range Rover, wearing a tailored pantsuit despite the early hour, looking like a predator ready for the kill. She was followed by Ethan and Sophia, and 2 men I didn't recognize, carrying briefcases, their faces grim and purposeful. "Mr. Johnson," Olivia called out, her voice tight with a forced smile. "I see you're an early riser too. Wonderful. You can watch the groundbreaking ceremony." I held up my phone. "I've already called Sheriff Davis. He's on his way. I shall wash. You're trespassing on private property." Olivia, unfazed, unfolded a document from her leather portfolio. "Actually, Mr. Johnson, according to the county survey we commissioned, this land falls within community boundaries. We're being quite generous with the compensation package." Ethan Morgan snickered behind her. "Time to join the team, Michael. The resort will boost all our property values." I stood my ground, feeling the damp grass between my toes, a primal connection to the land fueling my resolve. I filed an emergency injunction yesterday. This land has been in my family for 3 generations, and I have the original survey markers to prove it. Olivia's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose slightly. "An injunction? How inconvenient." She turned to one of the suited men. "Harold, call Judge Watkins. Wake him if necessary." The distant wail of a police siren cut through the tension, a welcome sound in the escalating standoff. Sheriff Davis, my father's old fishing buddy, pulled up in his patrol car, looking irritated. "What's going on here?" he asked, adjusting his belt as he approached. Olivia stepped forward, extending a hand, her smile now a mask of practiced charm. "Good morning, Sheriff. Small misunderstanding about property lines. Nothing to worry about." "Nothing to worry about?" I echoed, my voice rising. "They're trying to steal my land." Sheriff Davis looked between us. "Ma'am, do you have permits for this machinery to operate before 7 a.m.? And construction permits for whatever you're planning?" Olivia's smile faltered. "We have HOA authorization." "That's not what I asked," Sheriff Davis interrupted, his voice firm. "County ordinance says no construction before 7 a.m. in residential areas. And I don't see any permits displayed." While they argued, I noticed Sarah, my 78-year-old neighbor, walking towards us with a stack of yellowed papers, her frail frame radiating an unexpected strength. She had been on the original HOA board 30 years ago before retiring. "Olivia," Sarah called out, her voice stronger than her appearance suggested, "you might want to see these before you make a terrible mistake." Olivia dismissed her with a wave. "Not now, Sarah." Sarah ignored her, handing me the papers instead. "Your grandfather and I prepared for something like this years ago. The HOA tried the same tactic in '89 with the Henderson property." I skimmed the documents. Original meeting minutes, showing the true boundaries had been officially recorded with the state, not just the county. "Sheriff," I said, my voice clear and strong, "I'd like to file harassment charges, and I want these people and their equipment off my property immediately." Olivia's phone buzzed. She stepped away to answer it, her face darkening as she listened. When she returned, her voice had lost its edge. "There appears to be a paperwork conflict," she announced to her group. "We'll postpone today's work to sort out these technicalities." The bulldozer operator looked relieved as he climbed down from his machine. "So, no work today?" "Pack it up," Olivia snapped, her voice sharp with frustration, as they reluctantly retreated. I noticed several neighbors had gathered at the edge of my property, watching the scene unfold, their faces a mixture of shock, concern, and in some cases, a glimmer of hope. Some had their phones out, recording everything. Olivia noticed too. Her eyes narrowed as she walked to her car. "This isn't over, Michael," she said, her voice a low, venomous threat. "The board votes tomorrow on invoking our emergency powers clause. I suggest you prepare a reasonable counter-offer before then." Or Sheriff Davis waited until they drove away before turning to me. "Your dad always said the HOA would try something like this after he passed. You holding up okay?" I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of this battle, the loneliness of fighting for what was right. "I'll be fine, but I need to prepare for tomorrow." Sarah patted my arm. "You're not alone, dear. Some of us remember how this community started, before people like Olivia tried to turn it into their personal country club." As we stood in my yard, watching the sunrise paint the sky with hues of hope and defiance, my phone dinged with a text from James. "Found something big in the county archives. Meet me at 9. Bring coffee, lots of it." I looked up at my neighbors, still lingering at the edge of my property. Some gave encouraging waves, while others turned away awkwardly. The battle lines were being drawn, and tomorrow's vote would test exactly who stood where, who valued community over personal gain. "You can't go in there." Olivia's assistant, a mousy woman named Brenda, tried to block my path as I pushed through the double doors of the Ridge Community Center. The emergency HOA meeting had started 20 minutes early, another one of Olivia's underhanded tactics. "Actually, I can," I replied, clutching my leather briefcase, the weight of it reassuring. Inside were the fruits of my all-night research session with James, documents that would change everything. Heads turned as I marched down the center aisle. The room was packed with over 100 neighbors. Some I'd known for decades, others recent arrivals, drawn by Olivia's promises of a resort-style community upgrade. Olivia stood at the podium, mid-sentence, her crimson lipstick matching her blazer, a picture of controlled power. As I was saying, before the interruption, the vote to invoke our Community Enhancement Clause requires a 2/3 majority. Before anyone votes, I announced loudly, my voice echoing through the room, "You should know what you're actually voting on." Olivia's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around the microphone. "Mr. Johnson, you're out of order. We're following Robert's rules here." "Funny you mention rules," I said, opening my briefcase, a sense of dramatic anticipation building in the room, "because I've spent the night discovering just how many you've broken." Whispers rippled through the crowd. I spotted Ethan and Sophia in the front row. Ethan, nervously adjusting his collar. 3 rows back, Sarah gave me an encouraging nod. "Point of order," called Harold, Olivia's lawyer friend, his voice sharp and demanding. "The agenda doesn't allow for—" "The agenda was changed without proper notice," I countered, my voice ringing with authority. "Section 5 of your own bylaws requires 72 hours for emergency meeting notifications, with no changes permitted after distribution." Harold's mouth snapped shut. Several neighbors murmured in agreement, the tide beginning to turn. I approached the front table where the board sat, their faces a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "I request 10 minutes to present relevant information before any vote occurs." Board member Diana Chun, who'd always been fair despite her friendship with Olivia, spoke up. "I move we allow Mr. Johnson to speak." "Seconded," called several voices, a chorus of support growing stronger. Olivia's face tightened, but she stepped aside, her voice strained. "Very well, 10 minutes." I laid out 3 large maps on the presentation table. "This first document," I began, "is the original 1952 survey of Maple Ridge, showing the natural creek boundary that defined my family's property." I pointed to the winding blue line, a stark contrast to the straight, artificial lines of the HOA's survey. The creek formed a natural border between private and community land, But during the flood of 78, the creek shifted. Ancient history, Olivia interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. Our recent survey— Your survey, I continued calmly, overriding her interruption, conveniently ignores the original boundary markers, which state law maintains as the legal definition, even when natural features change. I unveiled James's new certified survey, with red boundary lines extending far beyond what the HOA claimed. According to state law and county records, my property includes all of this area, which unfortunately for some of you, includes land you thought was yours. Gasps erupted as neighbors recognized the implications. That's impossible, Ethan Morgan sputtered, his face going pale. Unfortunately not, I replied, my gaze fixed on him. Your swimming pool extends 12 feet onto my legal property. And Olivia's home addition from last spring, it's 18 feet over the line. All eyes turned to Olivia, whose composed facade cracked for the first time, a flicker of panic crossing her face. This is absurd. Our survey was conducted by your brother-in-law's company, I finished for her, a cold satisfaction settling in. A clear conflict of interest, which I've outlined in this ethics complaint, filed with the state licensing board this morning. I handed copies to each board member, but there's something even more significant. From my briefcase, I carefully removed a plastic bag containing what looked like stone arrowheads, their edges worn smooth by time. During our legitimate survey yesterday, we discovered these artifacts, which the county archaeologist has preliminarily identified as dating back approximately 800 years. The room went completely silent. I've already filed for historical preservation status, I explained, which means no development can occur within 200 feet of the discovery site, effectively covering my entire property. Sarah stood from her seat, walking slowly to the front, her presence commanding respect. I was there when these were uncovered. As an amateur archaeologist, I recognized their significance immediately. Olivia's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. She shoved him away. This is a delay tactic, she hissed, her voice rising in desperation. We have investors waiting, contracts signed. Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Diana Chin leaned forward. What investors, Olivia? The board hasn't approved any contracts. Olivia's mistake registered on her face. Too late. The room erupted in questions, a cacophony of outrage and confusion. Order, order, Olivia shouted, banging her gavel so hard the head broke off, a fitting symbol of her crumbling authority. I wasn't finished. While researching property records, I discovered something else interesting. I held up a document with highlighted sections. 3 months ago, Olivia and her husband created an LLC called Ridgeline Development Partners. 2 weeks later, this LLC purchased the vacant lot next to my property, which would significantly increase in value if a resort facility were built adjacent to it. Board member Frank Thompson's eyes widened. You told us you sold that property to your cousin. This is character assassination, Olivia snarled. No, I replied calmly, it's public record. Diana Chin stood up. I move we adjourn this meeting and suspend all actions regarding the proposed development until a full investigation of these allegations can be completed. Seconded, called several voices, a wave of support sweeping through the room. You can't do this, Olivia's voice rose dangerously. We have deadlines. What deadlines? Asked Frank, his voice sharp with suspicion. And what contracts are you talking about? As the board members turned on each other, their carefully constructed facade of unity crumbling, I noticed Ethan Morgan slipping out a side door, phone pressed to his ear. Olivia saw me watching him leave, and something cold, something truly menacing, entered her eyes. This isn't over, Michael, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Not by a long shot. Diana approached me as the meeting dissolved into chaos. You should know, she said quietly, that Olivia's been talking to city officials about rezoning this entire area. Whatever game she's playing, it's bigger than just your property. I nodded, suddenly understanding the full scope of Olivia's ambition, the ruthless lengths she was willing to go to. Thank you for the warning. As neighbors crowded around me with questions, my phone vibrated with a text from James. Don't celebrate yet. Found building permits filed under different company name. They're going after Sarah's property next. Meet me at county office ASAP. I looked across the room, where Olivia huddled with Harold and 2 board members. Despite the setback, she wore a slight smile, a chilling reminder that this battle was far from over. "Get off my property!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with a mixture of anger and exhaustion, as Olivia's fancy car pulled into my driveway, kicking up gravel. The entire HOA board spilled out like angry hornets from a disturbed nest, their faces a mixture of defiance and apprehension. My heart pounded, but I planted my feet firmly on my porch steps, refusing to be intimidated. "We need to talk," Olivia said, her voice icier than a winter storm. She clutched a leather folder so tightly, her knuckles turned white. "Your little stunt at the meeting has forced us to involve our attorneys." Behind her stood a nervous man in an expensive suit who kept checking his watch. "Mr. Peterson, HOA legal counsel," he mumbled, barely looking at me. I crossed my arms, my gaze unwavering. Funny, I was about to call my lawyer too, and the county assessor, and maybe the local news station. Olivia's face twitched. The other board members exchanged worried glances. "Perhaps we could discuss this inside," Peterson suggested, his voice cracking slightly. I shook my head. "We can talk right here, where the neighbors can see us. I'm done with secret meetings and backroom deals." Mrs. Garcia, from next door, happened to be watering her flowers, clearly eavesdropping. Sarah had positioned her lawn chair on her front porch, with a clear view of my yard. Even old Mr. Jenkins had his window open, his hearing aid turned up high. The community was watching. Peterson cleared his throat. "We've reviewed your documentation. The board is prepared to make a reasonable offer." "Which is?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "We drop all claims to your property," Olivia said, through clenched teeth. "In exchange, you waive any claims against the structures currently on your land." I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You mean your illegal home addition and the Morgan pool that crosses my property line by 8 feet? That's your big offer?" "It's more than fair," board member Keith insisted, his face reddening. "What about the bulldozer that nearly destroyed my garden? The noise violations, the threats, the lies to the community about my land?" Peterson stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Be reasonable. We could tie this up in court for years." "You could try," I replied, pulling out my phone. But I recorded Olivia giving orders to start construction before the approved date. And I have statements from 3 contractors saying they were told to ignore property markers. I continued, watching Olivia's face pale with each word. The carefully constructed mask of control was crumbling. Olivia lunged forward, her voice a venomous hiss. "You can't prove—" "And I have copies of the emails where you discussed how to pressure me into selling," I interrupted, enjoying the look of utter panic that spread across her face. "My cousin in county records found those quite interesting." "Did you know improperly filed HOA documents become public record after 7 years?" The tension in the air felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Peterson whispered urgently to Olivia, whose perfectly styled hair seemed to droop with each passing second. "What do you want?" she finally asked, defeat creeping into her voice, the fight draining out of her. I'd been waiting for this question, preparing for this moment. "First," I said, my voice clear and steady, "a binding agreement, with severe penalties if broken." The leisure center gets built on the actual common land, by the front entrance. Second, I continued, revise noise rules with real enforcement. Third, you make a public apology at the next meeting. Ethan, who had been hovering behind the group, pushed forward. That's ridiculous. You can't make demands like... I'm not finished, I interrupted calmly. Fourth, I want a position on the Architectural Review Committee. And finally, a fund set up for property line verification for every home in the neighborhood, paid for by the HOA reserves. Impossible, Olivia exploded. We'd have to raise dues. Or, I suggested with a smile, cut your executive compensation. Your choice. The group huddled together, whispering frantically. Peterson kept shaking his head, while Olivia jabbed her finger at my house, her anger barely contained. Mrs. Garcia had abandoned all pretense of gardening and was now openly watching, a rapt audience. Sarah gave me a thumbs up from her porch, a silent show of support. After what felt like an eternity, Olivia marched back, her designer heels sinking into my lawn, a testament to her crumbling composure. Fine, she spat, extending her hand, her touch cold and reluctant. But this agreement includes a non-disclosure clause. No one hears about what happened here. I shook her cold hand firmly, a surge of triumph coursing through me. Too late for that. The neighbors have already heard everything. As they shuffled back to their cars, defeated and muttering, I overheard board member Keith whisper to Olivia, "Why did we agree to all this?" Olivia hissed back, "Because he didn't mention the tax reassessment that would happen if he reported the correct property lines to the county. We'd all be ruined." I smiled to myself. I hadn't even thought of that angle. Sometimes the best victories come from letting your enemies imagine their own worst fears. The battle was won, but something told me the war wasn't over. Olivia's eyes held a promise of revenge as she drove away, a chilling reminder that this was just a temporary truce. What was she planning next? My hands shook as I unfolded the certified letter 6 months after our showdown. Olivia had disappeared from public view, but rumors swirled through the neighborhood like autumn leaves. Some said she was gathering evidence against me. Others claimed she'd hired private investigators. The whispers kept me awake at night, a constant undercurrent of anxiety. The HOA meeting was scheduled for tonight. Would she make her move then? I scanned the official letterhead and gasped. The county tax assessor had completed their review of all Pinecrest Village properties based on the new accurate surveys. Olivia's property value had increased by a staggering 40% due to the undisclosed improvements crossing onto my land. The Morgans faced similar increases, a bitter pill of their own making. My own taxes remained unchanged, thanks to the historical designation James had helped me secure, a shield against their greed. My doorbell rang, startling me. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan Morgan, standing alone, shifting his weight nervously. "What do you want?" I asked, opening the door just enough to speak, my guard still up. Can we talk?" He looked different, humbler somehow, stripped of the arrogance he'd displayed months ago. "I brought something you should see." Cautiously, I let him in. He placed a USB drive on my coffee table, a small, unassuming object that held the potential to detonate Olivia's carefully laid plans. "Olivia's been planning something big," he explained, his voice low. "After you forced her to apologize, she became obsessed with getting even. She convinced half the board to support her secret project." I picked up the drive, my fingers trembling slightly. "What's this?" "Everything," Ethan said, his voice filled with a mixture of shame and regret. "Emails, plans, fake evidence she created to discredit your property claims. Samantha and I were part of it, until we saw how far she was willing to go." "Why turn on her now?" I asked suspiciously, my mind still reeling from the implications. Ethan sighed. The tax reassessment hit us hard. When I asked Olivia for help, she laughed and said we were acceptable collateral damage in her war against you. His eyes met mine, filled with a genuine remorse. We have kids heading to college soon. We can't afford her revenge games. The HOA meeting room buzzed with tension that evening. Attendance was higher than usual. Word had spread that something big would happen. I spotted the Morgans sitting far from Olivia, who glared at them venomously, the animosity palpable. Sarah, now serving as interim president, banged her gavel. Before we begin normal business, I understand Mrs. Sterling has an announcement. Olivia strutted to the podium, triumph glittering in her eyes, a predator ready to pounce. After months of investigation, she announced, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction, I've uncovered evidence that will shock this community. She pulled out a folder. The property survey that caused so much trouble, it was based on fraudulent documentation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My heart raced. I move that we immediately reverse all decisions based on these false claims and pursue legal action against... Point of order, I called out, standing before she could finish her sentence, my voice strong and clear. Before voting on any motion, I believe the board should review this evidence that just came to light today. I connected Ethan's USB drive to the projector. Olivia's face drained of color as her own emails appeared on screen, revealing her plot to fabricate evidence against me, her carefully constructed lies exposed for all to see. That's not real, she stammered, her voice cracking. It came from your own computer, Olivia, Ethan said, standing beside his wife, his voice filled with a newfound courage. We've provided sworn statements about how you asked us to help create fake documents. The room erupted. Board members shouted questions. Homeowners demanded answers. Through the chaos, I noticed Peterson, the HOA attorney, quietly slipping out the back door, abandoning his sinking ship. Sarah pounded her gavel repeatedly. Order! Order! As acting president, I move that we immediately suspend Mrs. Sterling from the board, pending investigation. The vote was unanimous except for Olivia, who sat frozen in her chair, her carefully crafted world collapsing around her. As people filed out afterward, neighbors who had once avoided me stopped to chat. Mrs. Garcia brought homemade cookies. Old Mr. Jenkins clapped my shoulder. You stood up for all of us, he said gruffly. These fancy newcomers forget what community really means. 2 weeks later, a construction crew broke ground on the new leisure center, on the proper community land near the entrance, exactly as I had suggested. The updated noise ordinances had transformed our once rowdy neighborhood into a peaceful haven. Olivia had quietly listed her house for sale, her reign of terror finally over. A knock at my door revealed Sarah, with a bottle of champagne and official-looking papers. The board voted unanimously, she announced proudly. You're now chairman of both the Architectural Review Committee and the newly created Property Rights Committee. We sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with vibrant colors, glasses raised in a toast to victory. I never wanted a fight, I admitted, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. I just wanted what was rightfully mine. Sarah nodded. Sometimes, the best trap isn't set with anger, but with patience. You gave Olivia enough rope, and she hanged herself. As twilight settled over my land that would stay in my family for generations, thanks to its new protected status, my phone buzzed with a message from Ben. University experts finished testing those artifacts James found. They're not just real, they're rare. State Historical Society wants to talk about a preservation grant. I laughed out loud. Grandfather always told me this land was special, but even he couldn't have guessed how valuable it would become. Not in dollars, but in community, in history, in the enduring power of truth. The HOA had taken my bait perfectly, rushing to grab what they thought was easy pickings, never suspecting I'd laid a trap that would protect this place forever. The sweetest victories aren't won through force, but through wisdom, through perseverance, and sometimes justice arrives in unexpected packages, wrapped in preservation orders that not even the most determined HOA can override. This story teaches us the importance of knowing our rights, standing up for what we believe in, and the power of community. It highlights how greed and corruption can be overcome with patience, perseverance, and a commitment to truth. It also emphasizes the importance of preserving history and heritage for future generations. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever faced a similar situation with an HOA or other authority figure? Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories and insights.